Hi, I'm Jim Monroe, and this is Sun Speed. Here we are on the verge of the Australian Grand Prix. Can you believe we're back in action soon? So who better to give us the whys and wherefores of the new season than our 1996 world champion and a key member of Sky Sports F1's team, Damon Hill. Hi, Damon.
Good afternoon.
Now, Damon, as a driver, this time of year, the first race is about to start. Surely they just want to get in the car and race now, don't they?
They do. They've done a lot of talking and a little bit of relaxing after the end of last year.
Yeah.
And then pretty soon after that, they want to get on with the show and try and get their car competitive. They've done their testing and they've talked to all the journalists, and now they just want to get down there and get in their car.
What did you used to do during the winter break? Was there time for much of a break? Was it surfboard out?
Well, I didn't surf then, but I mean, there's always some other thing, and we used to spend a lot of time testing. There wasn't the testing restrictions in those days, so you'd get maybe a couple of weeks off, and then you'd be up until Christmas testing around places like Estoril or Jerez or Barcelona, and then in January you'd be testing, and February you'd be testing, and then eventually you'd be glad when the testing was over.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned testing, because you were out in Barcelona for the final days of testing out there. What was your driver's nose picking up out there? Were there any cars that were perhaps people were braking a little early, or anything that didn't sound quite right? Any little tips you can give us?
Well, I was quite surprised at McLaren. I didn't get the sense that the McLaren was totally sorted yet.
Yeah.
I'm sure the potential's there for it to be a good car. Slightly different layout that they had from last year's car, but so they seem to be straight. And I was quite surprised by Red Bull's lack of running. They seem to be when Mercedes were definitely going round and round and successfully putting in a lot of laps. Yeah. They seem to be doing a lot of in and outs.
A lot of conversations between Christian Horner and Sebastian Vettel and things going on.
Yeah, and people. I mean, the Lotus had an issue with one day, and then Kimi Räikkönen had a day off because he wasn't feeling well.
Yeah.
So the pattern wasn't clear. The only thing you could say is that Mercedes were comfortably able to put in lots of laps, which they did day in, day out. So it's really difficult to call this one.
Yeah. Well, coming in then to the Australian Grand Prix, Australia is a place that's had mixed emotions for you, because of course 94 you had Michael Schumacher trying to treat you as a trampoline, but then 95 you won the last race at Adelaide, didn't you? And then 96 you won the first race at Melbourne. So happy memories in general from those days?
Yes, I think everyone enjoys going to Australia. The sun's always shining, and well, nearly always, and there's a good buzz. I think I'm not sure that all Australians are totally tuned into F1, but Melbourne comes alive. It's a great atmosphere at Albert Park, and you know the start of the season is always a great event. Anyway, no one's won anything yet. We're desperate to find out what the form is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, very quickly run through the teams. Red Bull, we've mentioned they've been a bit cagey. Christian Horner was actually bigging up Lewis Hamilton's chances the other day. Do you think they're going to be coming out the blocks quickly, or?
I'm sure they're going to be on the pace. I mean, the point to make about when Lewis made his decision to go to Mercedes, the Mercedes team did not look terribly good, and it must have looked like it was an awfully bad choice. Yeah. But in truth, I think Ross Brawn and the Mercedes team have decided, listen, this year is a write-off. We need to put all our effort into next year's car. They've been, by the looks of things, they've been focusing on 2013 and pretty much shelved 2012. Yeah. So they look worse than they are. I mean, this year I think you're seeing the true potential of the Mercedes team.
Yeah, well, Lewis and Nico Rosberg both had very good testing sessions, didn't they? It's going to be hard to tell them apart, though. They've both got yellow helmets.
Yes, also, Lewis's replacement at McLaren has also got a yellow helmet, and Sergio Perez. So there's 3 yellow helmets out there. We're going to have to put some sort of sticker on them, or flag or something. We'll work it out.
Get Natalie to put a cross of lipstick on someone's helmet or something. That brings me on nicely to a question. My 5-year-old, I was seeing you today, he's come up with a very good question, far better than anything I could think of. Right. You mentioned Sergio Perez at McLaren. We've mentioned Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes. Which one of those 2 drivers will be the first one to win a race this season? That's from my 5-year-old.
Yeah, that is an interesting, and I think that is the sort of insight that 5-year-olds have that us old folk somehow lose. And he may well have had some sort of vision of the future there. it'd be interesting to see, wouldn't it? That'd be exactly the sort of thing that happens in Formula 1. Makes everyone just realise they don't know what they're talking about.
Lotus, do you think those guys are going to be hanging around with the big boys this season again?
I think, do you know what? Lotus are very good, and they've got a competitive car, and they were very competitive in places last year. I don't see that they've got enough yet to be able to put both their drivers right up there on a regular basis and displace Ferrari or Red Bull or McLaren, or even maybe Mercedes. So to do that, you have to have something exceptionally good. And I haven't so far seen enough of the Lotus to be able to say whether they've made that step yet.
Do you think Romain Grosjean will have calmed down a little this season? He was maybe a bit erratic. Well, I mean, Mark Webber called him a first lap nutcase, which was perhaps a bit excessive. But do you think, having got a season under his belt, he might be a bit more careful about what he's doing in those opening laps?
We'll see. I think he did make an effort at the end of last year to mend his ways a bit. I think he didn't. It must have hurt that he had so much criticism, especially from other drivers. But then, do you know, when they sense blood, those guys, they don't hang back. So but he was the reason why there was a massive accident in Spa, and he has to own up to that. And it is really, really dangerous motor racing, and you can't be making reckless kind of moves. So we'll see. We'll see.
And Ferrari, for once, making positive noises. Fernando Alonso actually saying he was quite happy with testing. First time in a couple of years, he seems to be satisfied with what's gone on.
Well, the car looked good. I mean, last year's car was an absolute disaster when it started. It was shocking. And they spent most of the year catching up, and they never really did catch up. So I think they've got a fantastic platform now to go forward.
Okay. Well, the race itself, I know it's the first race of the season, Damon, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Who do you see being on the front couple of rows of the grid, and who's your little fancy for the win?
Well, I think that what we saw at the end of last year was pretty much the form you're going to see at the start of this year, with the possible exception of Mercedes. And we think in terms of Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes. You know, Nico Rosberg's no slouch either. So, you know, you could see Mercedes upsetting the lockout at the front with Ferrari, Red Bull, and McLaren. So it's going to be the lead drivers in those teams, I would say, are going to dominate the first first three rows of the grid. Right.
And going to put your name to a winner for us?
Yes. I'm gonna say that the possibility, it is possible. I think Vettel might win.
Right.
Because if you looked at what he did in Abu Dhabi, it's a very similar track to Melbourne, and I think that, you know, if he qualifies well enough and stays out of trouble, he might just kick off the season in that way.
Superb. Damon, thanks very much for your time as always. Pleasure speaking to you, and hopefully we'll catch up with you again soon.
I wish I had the insight that your son has to tell you about who's going to win.
I should bring some of his knowledge with me next time. Cheers. Now don't forget, you can follow all of the action from Australia on the Sun's website at thesun.co.uk/motorsport.